Lord, it's more likely that Christians are in the middle of the Great Tribulation. When we hear of earthquakes and famines and wars, it makes us wonder if the coming of Christ might not be near. Then these events fade into the background, and the world leaders pass off the scene, and the tide of events leading to the end of the age seems to have receded for a time. Then once again a new wave of events will break on the world scene, and once again our expectation of Christ's return is increased. With each successive wave of events, we do not know which one will be the last. And this is good because God does not intend us to know. He simply wants us to continue to long for Christ's return and to expect that it could occur at any time. It's spiritually unhealthy for us to say that we know that these signs have not occurred. And it seems to stretch the bounds of credible interpretation to say that we know that these signs have occurred. But it seems to fit exactly in the middle of the New Testament approach toward Christ's return, to say that we do not know with certainty if these events have occurred. Responsible exegesis and expectation of Christ's sudden return and a measure of humility in our understanding are all three preserved in this position. Last paragraph. Still there? Then if Christ does return suddenly, we will not be tempted to object, saying that one or another sign has not yet occurred. We will simply be ready to welcome him when he appears. And if there is great suffering yet to come, and if we begin to see intense opposition to the gospel, a large revival among the Jewish people, remarkable progress in the preaching of the gospel through the world, and even spectacular signs in the heavens, then we will not be dismayed or lose heart, because we will remember Jesus' words. When these things begin to take place, look up and raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. There's your conclusion on this particular topic of Christ's return. Now, let's have... We don't have enough time to... I would like to have had us get in groups and have a little bit of discussion, but we're not going to do that for time's sake. So, let's hear from some of you as I ask some of these questions. But again, be aware that lots of people in the room might have something to add. So, first question is, before we started talking about this, did you think that Christ could return at any hour? Many of you are nodding, yeah, previous to talking about this, I thought it could happen at any time. Now what do you think? Anybody want to comment? Anybody say, yeah, I still believe that? Or now I see maybe there's some things that got to happen? Or something's changed? Something you learned? Or something that gave you something to think about? Or anybody?
Well, we all know that from what we've talked about, it could happen very quickly. Mm-hmm. But if it could happen very quickly, that doesn't mean, like 27 seconds from now. Mm-hmm. Can it happen that quickly? Mm-hmm. Or even 3 seconds from now? So.
Okay. All right.
I kind of reflect on when they had that refugee crisis years ago and how quickly, a lot of people, thousands of people accrued in multiple countries. And that only took not even a week. But so maybe it could be not any second, but it's pretty darn close.
Okay.
All that stuff said, like you mentioned, it could be instantaneous. Is Romans 9 a prediction for, what it was talking about with the end times and the man of lawlessness? A lot of things are still, even with that, hard to interpret, but it seems like it's pretty close.
Okay. Matt?
I'd say I still feel the same way, but I think the different thing about it now is I know more the logistics behind it. So when you think about it more, I think it just helps cause for a reason to just draw closer to Christ as a result. Just thinking about all these different things and just thinking about what Christ is going to do. And when we read that last sentence of that book, was it says we can count on our redemption coming soon. We just have more behind it. There's more meat and potatoes behind it rather than just saying, oh yeah, I believe Christ is coming soon. There's just more meaning and more depth to it now. I think it makes it more rich.
Cool.
myself, I'm stuck between two different viewpoints. Whether all the stuff has already happened and I've studied that further, and I'm like, it makes a lot of sense that I can see a lot of the stuff has happened before, but then I'm also like, maybe I should give some room for it. But really what it's kind of done for me in studying this stuff has been like not having like an escapeful attitude towards the end times, like, please Jesus, just come now so that I don't have to do any work. It's given me more of an attitude of like, okay, my view of end times has been like, I think just pushing towards things getting better before Christ's return, and right. I like how Doug Wilson put it. You know, when he was building a house, you know, he didn't have all the tools to build the house, but what he had was a rake, some rocks, and he could just do the work. And I'm just like, that's how I feel with this. And like, I can just keep plugging along.
When I was younger, what I was pretty much taught is that he could come in any time. That's the impression they gave on me. But after studying this stuff in depth, on reading the systematic theology myself and doing my own studies, I'm more on the fact that it's a set day, that this is going to happen, and we're only drawing closer to that day as the days goes on. So.
Okay. Here's your. I always like to give you a 1-minute sermon on Wednesday nights to cause you to really think. This is what, as I was praying about tonight, what came to my heart to share with you. If we think about those scriptures that some say, yeah, can happen any second. Some seem to say these things have to happen. Go back through the 4 options, right? First one is, this stuff has to happen, so it's not going to happen any second or any real soon. All right, these things have to happen. Then what was there? Then there's the view that be ready because there's going to be a rapture. Bam. The third view was these things have already happened, so be ready. Fourth one was they probably haven't happened, but they could have happened, so what? Be ready. So chances are 3 out of those 4 views leave you saying, be ready. And I would probably venture to say, for the most part, the majority of us in this room would go with one of those views that ends with the result of, be ready. Right? However, I would also venture to say that most of us in this room probably live as though we believe there's time. Here's your sermon. What do you really believe? We just read a devotional tonight that talked about what you do is what you believe. And I know it's an old way of looking at things, but I still see it as so real. You want to know what you believe, look at how you spend your time and how you spend your money. Is the way you're spending your time and the way you're spending your money indicating, yeah, I believe Jesus could come at any moment and I need to be spending my time serving Him, getting to know Him. The way I'm spending my money is for His kingdom. Or is it one that seems, if somebody looked, yeah, I think this stuff all has to happen and not really any big sense of urgency. Because the way you live is the way you really believe. And I hope this hits us. I hope that this is what was on my heart as I prepared for tonight. Because for the most part, I come here and I share stuff with you. But this has to be real. What do you really believe? Do you really believe Jesus could come at any moment? Imminent. It's imminent. And if you believe that, then look at your life. Look at how you're spending your time. Look at how you're spending your money. Look at how you're investing your life. Because this is real. It's going to happen. You know? And if I've said enough. It's true. It shows what we believe, the way that we live. Now, I'm just going to read these couple questions because there's not time to answer them because I'm going to show you a sermon. Listen to these questions, okay? I don't know if I put them on your papers. Are there questions on your papers?
Yep. Yeah.
Is there number 2? Have you had times?
Yeah.
All right, then you can follow along. You can go on and talk about these. Have you had times in the past where you had a greater longing for Christ's return than maybe you do now. If you're not longing for Christ's return, what factors in your life do you think are contributing to a lack of longing? Number 3, do you have or had any hesitancy to begin a long-term project because you think Christ's return is near? If so, do you think that hesitancy is healthy? And number 4, if you knew Christ was going to return within 24 hours, what would you want to straighten out before he did? Do you think Christ's command to be ready is telling you to straighten these things out now? This is serious stuff to reflect upon, to meditate upon, to discuss as a church and with other believers, right? So, well, the biggest thing I want to see happen is because we have several weeks, we have a couple months talking about this, is to see us get this, to see us live this, to see us long, truly long, and live as though we're longing for Christ's return, and we believe that it could happen at any time. Now, I want to show you a Francis Chan sermon, and it's called "Could Jesus Return at Any Time?" And this is just kind of a wrap to this Christ returning section as a motivation to live this. And then a couple minutes left after that if something else to do.
By a show of hands, how many of you believe that Jesus Christ could return at any moment? Okay, almost all of you. Let me ask you a different question. Don't raise your hands just yet. But how many of you would really want him to return before I'm done speaking today? Think about it first. Do you really want Jesus Christ to return before I am done speaking today? How many of you would really want that? Okay, not even half. It's interesting, you know, I did that the other week, last weekend when I was at Ventura. I had 300 guys in front of me and asked them the same question. First one, everyone raised their hand. Second time, only about 30 of them raised their hand. 1 out of 10 said they wanted Jesus Christ to return right then. And there's different reasons. Some people say, well, I don't want to return yet because I have some people I need to talk to. And I want to talk to them first and make sure, you know, they understand, you know, and that's a good reason. The question is, well, what are you waiting for? You know? What if he does return before I'm done speaking? But there are others, and I'm guessing more of you, who just say, well, I'm not ready for him to return yet because there's some things I'd like to get right in my own life. I mean, for much of my life, I did not want Jesus to return. I understood that truth in Scripture, but there's so much about me where I just like, man, I'm not at peace with where my life is right now. I'd like to get some things together. I'd really like to be found really serving him and living in a certain way. But the sad thing is, you know, I've been asking this question as I've been traveling around and speaking, and I find that most Christians in America do not want Jesus to return yet. And yet the Bible talks about it as this thing that we should be so anticipating and so looking forward to. It gives a picture of a bride and the groom coming for her. And she's just waiting any moment, my groom's going to come. He's going to come and take me. We're going to go and get married. And it's that waiting for that moment with such anticipation. And he says that's the way we as the bride of Christ should be, looking and waiting. Just saying, man, nothing else really matters in life. I just can't wait for that moment when Jesus comes and takes me, be his bride, takes me to be with him. Is this something you're excited about? Because what an awful way to live, to wake up each morning and say, I hope this isn't the day that Jesus returns. You know, instead of having the anticipation of going, this could be the day. This could be the greatest day of my life. This could be the day when Jesus Christ comes back for me. See, in Luke chapter 12, Jesus uses a different analogy about this anticipation for the return of Christ. And he uses this picture of servants waiting for their master who's been away at this wedding banquet. And he starts this passage in verse 35. Luke 12, verse 35. He says, excuse me if I keep breaking. I got the flu and I've been on NyQuil all night, so I'm like all over the place. Luke 12, verse 35 says this. Be dressed, ready for service, and keep your lamps burning, like men waiting for their master to return from a wedding banquet, so that when he comes and knocks, they can immediately open the door for him. It will be good for those servants whose master finds them watching when he comes. I tell you the truth, he will dress himself to serve, will have them recline at the table, and will come and wait on them. It will be good for those servants whose master finds them ready, even if he comes in the second or third watch of the night. Okay, so in talking about the return of, his own return, he's saying it's like a bunch of servants at this house, and the master goes away to a wedding banquet. And so he comes back. He doesn't say what time he's going to come back. He's going to come back sometime. And he says, and when he returns, it'll be good for those servants who are actually ready to serve. Not the ones that are asleep, not the ones that are doing their own thing, but the ones that are waiting for his return, ready to open the door right when he knocks. He says it's going to be good for those servants. He uses this phrase in verse 35. He says, be ready and dressed for service. The term actually literally in Greek it just says, gird up your loins. Okay, and the idea is, back then they would have these robes, these long flowing robes, and you just kind of have them, just kind of out there and just like, a big bed sheet. And the idea of girding up your loins is what they would do whenever they were getting ready to move, when they would run, when they would serve, is that they would pick up their cloth, whatever you call it, their dress, and they get a belt and they would tie it all up, tie it all tight. And when you're like that, if you're just a little more stiff, but you're ready for action, you weren't going to have this big gown that you're going to be tripping over. And that's the term that's used there. He says, when the master returns, he doesn't want to find you, just totally relaxed, kick back on the couch, with your gown all untucked. He says he wants you ready for action. All your clothes are girded up. You're actually serving. You're actually doing something. And he uses that term. He goes, be dressed, ready for service, and keep your lamps burning. The idea of keeping your lamp burning is, today it's like if someone knocks on the door, you can turn the light on, clap on, and your lights turn on. Back then, it's the idea of, to keep this lamp burning because it's pitch black. It's pitch dark. And the whole idea is you've got your lamp burning, you're all dressed, you're ready for service, you're, picking up around the house, whatever you need to be doing, and so that when the master comes and you hear that knock, immediately you can open up the door. He says that's the way it ought to be. He says there ought to be a watching, a readiness. It's the opposite of, if the master came back and he finds all his servants asleep, what does that tell him? It shows him that these guys aren't that serious. These guys, it was a lack of respect. The whole point of it, if you got your whole household and all these servants got their lamps burning, they're ready, they're serving, and even while you're gone, and when you walk in that door, it's like, it just shows a respect, it shows a glory, it shows that you are worth it. You are worth waiting for. We serve you when you're not watching, when you're not here. We're ready for you. And what blows me away is verse 37, when it says, it will be good for those servants whose master finds them watching when he comes. I tell you the truth, he will dress himself to serve and will have them recline at the table and will come and wait on them. Okay, this is a very bizarre thing. Okay, their culture, the idea is the master comes back and he looks and he sees that all his servants are working. All his servants are ready for him. And he is so blown away by that he tells his servants, hey, why don't you guys sit back at the table and let me serve you? Okay, that's just something that never happened. But as I was looking at this, the first time I ever really thought about it, Jesus is talking about his return, and he says, if I find you like those servants waiting and watching, he goes, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to serve you. I just want you to imagine that for a second. You picture, I've never thought about this. Can you picture Jesus serving you? like when Jesus Christ returns and you're ready, you're serving him, you're watching for him, you're waiting for him, and he comes and he sees you so ready, he says, you know what? I want you to recline. I want you to recline at this table and let me serve you. I mean, I got the chills this week just thinking about that. What would that be like to have the Son of God, God himself, humble himself and serve me? That thought had never even entered my mind. All I think about is, I got to serve God. I got to do this for him, do this for him. And yet he says, man, I find you. And that's Jesus. He says, it's going to be good for those of you who are watching and waiting for me, serving me. Because when I see that, I'm going to come and I'm going to tell you to recline at the table and I'm going to serve you. Pretty amazing thought. It will be good, it says in verse 38, for those servants whose the master finds ready, even if he comes in the second or third watch of the night. The night was divided into 3 watches. It'd be like 6 to 10, 10 to 2, then 2 to 6 in the morning. And the whole idea is, he goes, hey, even if the master's been gone to this banquet, and now it's 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and he comes in, and maybe some of the people are sleeping, he goes, but the servants that are still awake, the servants that are still doing it, it's going to be really good for them. Because you can imagine, as a servant, what's going to happen as it gets later and later and later. People start nodding off, right? And there's just a few, there's just a few still awake, still waiting, because it's been really good for them. You guys, I think that's just a perfect picture of America. It's like the longer Christ waits, the longer he tarries, it's like you see more and more people get just kind of apathetic toward it. And it's hard, because some of us that grew up in church, some of you guys have been in church a long time. And you remember the first time you heard about Jesus' return. And you remember how you're just like anxious for it? Like, wow, he could return any day. And you start taking it seriously. Wow, he could return today. Is my life together? But then after a few years, you start going, okay, I've kind of gone down that route. And suddenly we're not as prepared anymore. We're not as ready anymore. And we can start dozing off. We start doing our own thing, start getting lazy, and we no longer think about the return, right? And so he gives a serious warning in verse 39. He says, he changes the analogy. He says, but understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. Okay, so then he changes the analogy to, and before he was saying service to a master, he goes, but now he says it's like a thief is going to break into your house. He said, if you knew what time the thief was coming, you could be prepared, right? Maybe it'd be kind of nice if you knew exactly when a thief was going to come. You call the police over your house, or take matters in your own hand, whatever you want to do. Turn on the sprinklers, get them wet, whatever. It's just the whole idea, if I knew what time he's coming. But the point is you never know. You don't know when a thief is going to come. And so you just have to be ready all of the time. And he goes, that's that picture of, look, I'm not telling you when I'm going to return. You just need to be ready at any time. You just have to be prepared for it. I've used this illustration before, but it's like the only one I know for this. My wife's grandmother, Clara, we were at this little family get together. We went over to Moore Park Melodrome. I told you guys this story a few years ago, and it was so cool because we went to this play, right? And during halftime, I look over to Lisa's grandma, and I go, hey, what'd you think? Because it's kind of break, everyone's getting drinks and stuff. I go, hey, what do you think about this so far? And she looks at me and she goes, oh, honey, I don't want to be here. I'm like, well, why? It's a good play. It's kind of clean. There's nothing bad. But what I like about it is there's no bad words. They're all doing good things. There's nothing evil about it. She goes, oh, it's not that. And I go, well, why don't you want to be here? And she goes, I just don't know if this is where I want to be when Christ returns. It's like, whoa, really? And she just says, I just would rather be at home praying for you, praying for your church, or going out and trying to help someone and do something for them. And so that when the master returns, I'm found doing that. I don't want to be found sitting in a theater watching a play. oh. And I use that illustration, even though I've used it before, because that's the only time I ever heard anyone talk about the return of Christ in day-to-day life. And this woman who seriously is thinking, wait, what if he returns right now? Not that she's doing anything even evil right then. It's just, this isn't what I want to be doing when he returns. I guarantee you, the whole second half of the play, I didn't watch a bit of it. You know, I mean, the whole time I'm thinking, maybe she knows something, you know. And seriously, through the whole second half of the play, the whole time I was just praying for people and just thinking, I want to be doing something eternal. I want to be focused on it. If he returns right now, I want to be found like one of those servants that's actually doing something, serving him, and being okay with that. It's like, how many people on this earth do you really know that live like that? I'm not saying she's this perfect woman, but it's just, how many people even ever talk about it? Of, would it be okay if he returned right now? How about right now? You know, how would he find me? Does that even enter your mind? Because you have these passages about him saying he wants us to be like those servants ready for action. He wants us to be like a householder just waiting for that thief to come. You just know he's going to be there. How do you categorize yourself? Are you one of these servants that's girded up, you're dressed, ready for service, your lamp's burning, you're waiting for him to come? Or are you a servant that's just kind of kicking back, laying on the couch, you know, not even thinking about him returning? Well, he goes on, verse 41. Peter asks, Lord, are you telling this parable to us or to everyone? The Lord answered, who then is the faithful and wise manager whom the master puts in charge of his servants to give them their food allowance at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whom the master finds doing so when he returns. I tell you the truth, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose the servant says to himself, my master's taken a long time in coming, and he then begins to beat the men servants and the maid servants and to eat and drink and get drunk. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he is not aware of, he will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the unbelievers. That servant who knows his master's will and does not get ready or does not do what his master wants will be beaten with many blows. But the one who does not know and does things deserving punishment will be beaten with few blows. From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded, and from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. Yeah, that's a pretty serious passage. You know, it's interesting because I've had people come to me and they go, you know, Francis, you know, when Jesus came, Jesus was very gentle. Okay? He didn't condemn anyone. He didn't use harsh words. Why sometimes when you preach, it just seems so harsh? And you know, when Jesus was so gentle. Because let me read that verse again. Let me read verse 46 again. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the unbelievers. That's gentle. He'll cut him to pieces and then assign him a place with the unbelievers. You know, clearly, you know, it's talking about hell. It's talking about he's going to come back, he's going to cut him up into pieces, and then take his soul and assign it to a place with unbelievers. Pretty intense. I mean, why does Jesus use such graphic words? I mean, why does he use such graphic language about this man being beaten with many blows, being cut up, thrown in a place of unbelievers? Because it's a warning. You know, you ever, those of you who are parents, you ever, you know, just make a warning so strong, it's like you see your kid just kind of going, yeah, okay, I won't play in the street. And you go, no, you don't understand. You know, if you play on the street and you get hit by a car, you know what it feels like to have a car run over you, you know? And you know when your head just snaps off and the blood gushes, and do you know what that feels like? Don't go out in the street, you know? And it's like, you know, as a parent, it's like, I don't know, maybe that's just my parenting, but you just, it's like, you just want to wake them up. Do you understand the seriousness of this? This is serious. You know how painful this is going to be. I just see Jesus talking to these people, and it's like, you guys, wake up. Man, any moment the thief can come back. Any moment that the master master is going to return any moment. You've got to be ready. This is so, so serious. Because a lot of times we can just sit in church and we hear this stuff. It's like, okay, another good sermon. Yes, I should return. Wait for the return. This and that. It's like, man, do you get it? Do you get how serious this is? He's saying, if you know what's right, you got to do it. You're accountable for that. To get serious about this. You guys, any second, our lives are going to change. Completely. Man, Friday when you went to bed, you didn't know the next day that this whole place was going to be up in smoke. That's the way our lives happen. It's like, man, things happen. Just overnight, and your whole life is different. And this should give us a picture of realizing, at any moment, Jesus Christ is going to return, and how many things will not matter anymore. How many things that you worried about this week just won't even matter, and how many things really will? He says, would you wake up and realize this? And I just see him using the strongest language he can use. When Peter asked that question in verse 41, he says, Lord, are you telling